Hi everybody. So I will talk during these 20 minutes a lot about mobile app store economy and try to drill through a lot of data actually. So first I will talk a bit about us, and then I will focus on how big are iOS games and look at a different way around the market. Then I will have a look at seasonal trends, what happens over a 2-year time frame on iPhone, iPad. And last, I will try to showcase the difference in market size penetration between iOS and Google Play with a special focus on US, Japan, and the UK. So about us, Apani, for those who don't know us yet, basically we are positioning ourselves in the market data, market intelligence space. So the same way you needed a Nielsen for your TV ratings, a ComScore for the open web, NPD for retail, we position ourselves as the leading market provider in the digital app store business. So who is using us today? It's easy if you take the top 100 publishers on iOS today by revenue, 80% are using Apani. And it's not just publishers, it's everybody else in the industry as well. We have a lot of most investors, VCs these days are using us to find new apps, hedge funds, carriers, OEMs, platforms, and a small section of our paid customers. And yeah, many of them are here and many of them are top publishers. And in terms of total usage, we have more than 125,000 apps using our analytics service. So to go back to what we provide, we have 3 types of services. 2 are free, 1 is a premium service. Our analytics service doesn't require an SDK, connect directly to the backend system of the stores, and is the most widely used service of its kind today for iOS and Google Play. On Store Stats, we provide a lot of free market data. You can check what has happened for any app, not just your app, but any app in terms of rankings, in terms of ratings, and see how it has evolved over time. And then we have a premium market intelligence service where we provide estimates about the market. And in terms of why do we provide a market intelligence service? It's simply to help our customer better inform their strategy, their competitor strategy, understanding their international, what's the best way to develop internationally, how to develop the best product portfolio, understanding better monetization as well as ad buying strategy. If you take the top 10 iOS publishers, all of them are in games, 7 are buying this market data today. So let's talk about the market. So iOS games, so we made a ranking by country, both by revenues and downloads. As you can see, US, of course, is still the biggest market. However, Japan has moved up, and definitely, at least on iPhone, it's the second biggest market by revenue. What's pretty surprising is that they have so few iPhones in the first place. By download, China is definitely the second biggest market, but monetization is not yet there. Definitely Australia, Canada, not to be underestimated by revenues. And on top of it, it's pretty easy to port from US, UK. In terms of market geography, where are the revenues, where are the downloads? Definitely for revenues in games. On iOS, US is still by far the biggest market. APAC, led by Japan, is the second market and is already twice as big as Europe. So it's really a big change in the last 18 months. And by download, APAC is today the biggest market, and it's led by China. So we did an analysis to try to understand to try to get a proxy of ARPU. So we look at revenue per download for iOS games that are monetizing either through paid downloads or through in-app purchase. What's pretty interesting is how big is Japan compared to the rest of the world. It's quadruple the average, 3 times the US. Japan is really a very specific market. What's interesting is that we keep hearing publishers telling us we copy what's going on in Japan. We try to apply that in other markets, and you know what? It kind of worked. We are able to increase our ARPU for different type of games. Maybe one last point, China is definitely the lowest in revenue per download. If we look at the top #1 app across country, how it's monetizing depending on the country, US is still the biggest place. If you are #1, that's where you will make most money. Japan, in some months, you can find that the top app in Japan is actually making as much, if not more money, depending on the months compared to the US. Then it's UK, and China has been growing actually. More and more publishers in China start to realize how they can make money. So it's still small, but it's definitely growing. So who are the top 10 publishers by revenue on iOS? This slide we are looking at non-US publishers. It's definitely a lot is coming from Japan. You can see 4 out of 10 are coming from Japan. We see Northern Europe, Eastern Europe, China, APAC. So definitely it's very Asian-oriented and Eastern Europe. What's interesting is that on average, they make 32% of their revenues in the US. So definitely not as good in the US as the rest of the world. If we take the top 10 game publisher by revenue on iOS, so this is a mix of iPhone and iPad. Definitely it helps if you are very strong on iPhone being still bigger than iPad. These are the top 10 based in the US. Of course, a few names you already know. What's interesting is that the percentage of revenues outside the US, many actually are doing a lot of business outside the US. So right now it's pretty tough to be a big publisher without significant chunk of revenues outside the US. So as a few key points, so what we can see is that APAC is definitely starting to challenge the US. It's already 2 times Europe, Western Europe. Many of the top game publishers are outside the US, and Japan revenue per download is 3 times US, 27 times China. So some trends about iOS. So we look at the last 2 years. This is iPhone, and we are showing on the bars downloads, on the line revenues. This is the last 2 years, and we try to map with different events. So you can see here Christmas, big increase, launch of a new device, big decrease before the launch. Christmas again, big growth. And yeah, what's interesting is that in terms of change over 2 years, iPhone revenues have grown by a bit more than 2 times. So it's good growth. It's not incredible growth. And what has happened for a few months now is we see that revenues have been outgrowing constantly downloads, which is in a way surprising, but probably representative of the strength of in-app purchase. So you download once, but you keep buying, and you stay in the same game. I would say I would have expected this trend would have started before. Definitely the launch on a new carrier like Verizon had some impact, but definitely limited impact overall. So this is for the US and only. So now if we stick to the US, but we look at iPad, one big difference is the growth. The growth rate is pretty different. We see 4 times increase in revenues. So that's really a big difference. We see similar trends. If we look at here, we have big growth through Christmas. So you can see that usually this is very impacted by the sales of new device. Definitely a decrease before launching a new device. So don't be shocked if you see less downloads revenues a few weeks before people stop buying, and if they stop buying new device, it has a direct impact on downloads and revenue. Christmas here again, it increased at Christmas. It decreased right before the launch of the new iPad. Here we have a different phenomenon compared to iPhone, is that we have seen downloads outgrowing revenues. So meaning that on iPad, definitely there is a different monetization strategy. either different monetization strategy from the publisher or users who have a different perspective on how they want to use their device and therefore how they are ready to buy app or to buy through in-app purchase. Definitely price point on iPad are higher than iPhone, as you know. If you take the Mac Store, for instance, price point would be even higher. So a few key points. Long-term, understanding the seasonal trends, I think, is pretty important. Understanding the launch date of new device and new carrier launch is pretty important as well, because it really impacts big time downloads and revenues. So if you don't time well the launch of a new app, it can definitely be impacted. What's also important is that you have to look at all of this on a country-by-country basis. Apple doesn't launch everything at the same time in every country. It's Christmas in Western countries. It's Chinese New Year in Eastern Asia. So different times when this impact happen. And definitely iPad started small but has been growing definitely fast and faster than iPhone. So let's talk about iOS versus Google Play, especially in game, comparing US, UK, and Japan. So as you can see, one thing is pretty clear is that Japan is still, both by revenue and download, a much bigger market for iOS than for Google Play. Even if in Japan, like the Android apps are mostly distributed through Google Play, still iOS has given much better result in terms of monetization. If we take US, UK, relatively similar in terms of perspective, some small change, but overall it's the same picture. What's interesting is that if you combine both iPhone and iPad, definitely iOS is still bigger, especially in revenues. But it's if you are just looking at smartphones, for instance, then the picture is different. You have definitely similar level of revenues. So what have been the fastest growing countries for game by revenues? What's interesting is that definitely for iOS, the fastest growth has been in Asia, except Belgium, obviously, but the rest has been growth in Asia. These numbers are for the last 6 months. If we look at Google Play, it's more balanced between Europe and Asia. And we see 100 to 200% growth rate over 6 months in these markets. If we look at by downloads, it's pretty similar. It's pretty similar, except that surprisingly here we have the same countries by downloads, where downloads are successful. Definitely some countries, especially in Southeast Asia, revenues have been growing fast, but downloads are often been growing faster, and it has been coming from a smaller base. Belgium is a different story. It was not so small to start with. We definitely see Thailand and Vietnam as a pretty interesting upcoming markets. So we had a look about the top categories, which one are the top categories by revenue and how it compares across countries and platform. What we can see is that there are some differences. Mostly, you can see that cards and brain games are going pretty okay on Google Play, but definitely iOS, you see it's a lot of role-playing simulation. So it's I would say more advanced games that you will see on iOS, probably for two reasons. One, it's easier to develop the advanced games on iOS, and second, the market is more mature, publishers are more mature, so they are willing to invest in more complex IP, where on Google Play it's more difficult to port, so you prefer to do easier stuff. It will probably change over time. If we look at by downloads, it's definitely different apps that are doing well on downloads. It's of course easier app, puzzle, brain, action, casual. we really see similar categories across countries and platforms, at least for these 3 countries. So as a summary of the trends we just saw, Google Play is today at 1/3 revenues compared to iOS. iOS has seen strong monetization in Asia. As you may have heard, China is becoming the 2nd biggest market for Apple for hardware, and we see similar things definitely on downloads, but not yet on revenues. And iOS is able to monetize more sophisticated titles at this stage. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I know we have some time for some questions, but I could start the questions first. You kindly share the download and revenue figures. The revenue figures, are they for sales of apps, or are they also including in-app purchases?
So that's a good question. It's sales of app and in-app purchase. So basically everything that goes through the stores, including subscription, but it doesn't include revenues coming from advertisement.
Okay, and I know it varies by game, but is there a rough breakdown for how much is from the sale of the game compared to the in-app purchase?
I don't have the number, but definitely if you look at the top 25 games by grossing, nearly all of them are monetizing through in-app purchase. Okay. Or they might have paid plus in-app purchase, but in-app purchase is a big component.
Okay, if you have a question, we have Todd as a runner. Please raise your hand and get the question. Thank you.
This is kind of a follow-up on comparing downloads and revenue from in-app purchases. Mm-hmm. Is the downloads number the revenue from buying the app, or what is that number, the downloads?
The downloads, it depends on the graph, but it's really downloading the app itself. It's not downloading an in-app purchase item. And right, it's not updating the app either. It's just downloading initially an app. And the app might be a free app with in-app purchase later. It can be just a paid app, or it can be a paid app with in-app purchase inside the game as well.
I may be missing something, but is the number for when comparing downloads, the number for downloads, is that dollars? What is that? Just number of downloads compared to revenue from in-app purchases?
No, if we look at this line, sorry if it was not clear. This slide. So here what we compare is apps that are monetizing. So we just look at downloads coming from apps that are paid apps, free with in-app purchase, or paid with in-app purchase. So we excluded pure free apps with no monetization through the store to make this calculation.
Thank you.
Other questions?
There is
Raise your hand. Hi, you had the revenue figures for iOS and Android, and you said Android is about 30% of iOS. But on Android, different categories are at the top of the App Store, like there's puzzle games and card games. When you compare within a category, like simulation games on Android versus simulation games on iOS, do you see a similar difference, or are they closer?
So you have to be careful by category, because you have a different number of categories on iOS and Android for games. Also, they don't have exactly the same categories. And in some cases, like iOS, you can put an app inside 2 categories. So basically, you can come double. So it's pretty tough. I will say it really depends on the game and how it has been marketed. The way you market a game on iOS and Android is pretty different. So you can be successful on one platform and unsuccessful on the other one. I would say a few titles are really successful across the board. If you take a Cut the Rope, Angry Birds, they will be very successful across platform. But if they don't have this world champion status, it really depends on marketing. How have you marketed across platform? And also, In some cases, we have seen cases where Android porting has been not so great, so you might have issues on that side. And some publishers are definitely making more on iOS versus Android and vice versa, depending on titles.
Hi, right here. There are a few different app stores on the Android devices. Are you focusing on Google Play just because it's like the 90% or 99% of all the downloads and revenue?
Yeah, at Tapani, we try to focus on what we call world platforms with worldwide distribution. For Google Play, for Android, you don't have so many platforms that have reached this status. If you look at Kindle Fire, that we intend to support later, we'll support that when they are not just in the US, but outside the US, which is coming soon. And if you look at all the carriers' platform, they are very local. It's for one specific country. And in some countries on Android, the carrier platform actually links directly to Google Play. So we capture that. In Japan, for instance, everything goes through Google Play, even if you buy initially through Docomo. So it's a market by market, but we believe that the market for pure local Android stores is actually pretty small. And we have seen very, very little interest from developers. Only Kindle platform has generated some interest so far.
Thank you.
Yeah, down front.
So you have some monetization results for China, which is obviously, it's not monetizing well, but perhaps that could be made up with numbers of users who are downloading or using the programs. And then the other question is, India is not in any of these things. So are they just not downloading it at all, or how is that going?
Yeah, that's so two good questions. So concerning China, definitely, I mean, there are number, 8 by revenues, but 2 by downloads. So you have, if you want downloads, you just go to China. You have a lot of downloads. But if you want to monetize, that's a very different story. And also, it's a pretty tough market to crack if you don't have a really China optimized app. Optimized in terms of not just translation, but also cultural look and feel, and all that stuff. It's probably not as tough to penetrate for foreign publishers than Japan. Japan is probably the most difficult to penetrate. But China is pretty tough, and the most successful in China so far are mostly local Chinese publishers. And the ones that have been successful in China have been very focused on some specific niche segments. China is a very different market. People who buy iPhone are buying iPhone for somebody else, for instance. They're buying iPhones for their wife or girlfriends. When you're buying a Mac or an iPad, it's as a gift, as a corporate gift. So many things are pretty different. So if you just market or target the same segments as in other countries, you might be pretty disappointed in China. For India, yes. Basically, India is nowhere in iOS or Google Play. Definitely, even Apple doesn't seem to care much about India. They see that more as a long-term opportunity. They don't even have local stores in India so far. It's only distributors. Product is very expensive in India as well. In China, again, let's not forget, in China, people are buying iPhones at $500, $600 plus. There is no subsidies for handset like in the US. You don't buy an iPhone $99. You have to spend $500, $600. So in China, people, just for face, might be happy to buy handsets at this price, but in India, people are not so happy to do that. So I guess it's a big issue for iOS, but we don't see so much either on Google Play so far. So, and in India, on top of it, you have issue with 3G networks. So
time for one more short question.
Oh, time's up.
Okay, very, very short. When I'm looking at it, when we look at the top 10 publishers, how do they represent in the revenue? Like if you take all the main 10 US publishers, what percentage they represent on the global revenue? Do you have this info?
I have it, but I don't have it in the back of my mind. But it's definitely, you don't have anybody with more than 10% of revenues. EA definitely is the biggest today by revenue worldwide. Altogether, it's, I would say, less than 40% if you take the top 10. Definitely, there is some concentration. One reason being that smaller app publishers have been acquired by EA, by Zynga, by a few companies. But, I mean, it's not changing dramatically. We are not at a stage where 90% of the publisher makes the market. Another interesting point is if we look at app by app, different countries have different results. If you take the top 10 apps in Japan, for instance, they represent a much bigger share of the revenues than the top 10 apps in the US. So in the US, the long tail does pretty well, but in Japan, it does pretty bad. So difference by market.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay.